Hello, my name is Aaron Woods. I'm a career counselor at Career Services at the college at Central Washington University in Ellensburg, Washington. Today, my guest is Kyle Martin, and he is a composer, sound designer, and audio lead at Everbloom Games. Welcome, Kyle.
Hey there.
Before I begin asking some questions about your career, could you give us a quick summary of what your major was in school, any specializations or minors, the year you graduated, and any education that you pursued since your time at CW?
Yeah, so when I was at Central, I started back in 2009, right after college. I was there for a quarter, then I left, and then went to community college, got my AA, my transfer degree, and I went back to complete my degrees in music education and saxophone performance. Um, and That's really all I've done since then in regards for furthering my education. After getting my ed degree, I was a substitute teacher for a little bit. And then after being a substitute teacher, I made my transition slowly into what I actually wanted to do, which was freelance video game sound design, specifically music composition and stuff like that, and building my own business in regards for essentially music business.
Nice. And what was your path in getting into the role that you currently have?
Yeah, so okay. So I currently work two different things. And the first one is the audio lead position at Everbloom Games. And then the second one is my own essentially in-house music and sound design studio, which is my freelance career, which is I operate under Kylidian Music. When I first left Central, my whole plan in regards for what I was doing was to get my foot in the door of the music industry. And I've kind of since learned that is like the biggest myth that there ever is. And it's kind of just a matter of like just doing it and just going for it and then basically just failing until you succeed is the way that it kind of works. So upon graduating, I worked as a substitute teacher for couple years while I was working at going to events and networking and meeting people and speaking at different conventions such as PAX, traveling out to San Francisco for Game Developers Conference, I did a few talks at Game SoundCon, and I basically just spent a lot of time working and trying to meet people to eventually hopefully land some gigs that would start to, land me more gigs and land me more gigs down the line. And it just, eventually it just kind of started snowballing. I picked up a private teaching gig out in Issaquah at Kaleidoscope School of Music, and that is about half, not half, maybe a third of what I do now. And everything just kind of kept rolling into itself as I just kept meeting more people and progressing.
Yeah, I really curious about that whole foot in the door thing. That's definitely sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. What would be some advice that what worked and what didn't in the sense of just getting from that not having a lot of professional experience into getting into real professional experience roles?
Yeah, so there's a really big well, actually, let's put it this way. So if you look on any website such as like Fiverr or Upwork, I think is the other big one, you'll see a lot of people doing music and sound design on there, and they'll be charging like dirt cheap prices for what they do in regards for music and sound design. And the idea of this is like, well, I just graduated college, I don't have any credits to my name, I have to get my foot in the door, that way people will pay me. And I had a really great mentor kind of leading up to this. His name is Akash Thakar. And one of the things that he had always said was, if you work for free, that's okay, but don't work for nothing. And essentially, if you're working for $5 or $10 or something like that, with this idea of getting your foot in the door, it actually makes it much harder to raise your prices down the line. Because when you do that, it kind of turns into this thing of people are like, oh, but you're the budget guy. But you're the budget guy. And when you start to like, music is essentially charged in per minutes completed of music. And so if you're charging, $5 to $10 per minute of music, and you write a minute of music a day, that's $10 a day that you make, which is much less than minimum wage. And so this whole idea of, like getting your foot in the door, over time, it starts to just not be sustainable. And people are like, well, why am I not making money? And it's like, well, because you're not charging what you're worth.
Mhm.
And so, it's been kind of this, it's been kind of this thing of like, like pricing yourself high and treating yourself as a professional immediately after you leave college, because, you kind of are. So
Oh, good advice. Yeah, I remember talking to, I did some video production company in the past, and I reached out to some other professionals in some different towns just to get their advice. And they did say, charge as much as you can. Don't undercut your competition. Create a standard that you're worth this work is worth this much, so that we don't have this scenario that you're just describing.
It's kind of crazy because, like, the idea behind it is like, well, if I charge myself, if I charge too much, then I'm not going to find work. And it's like, well, that's time that you could be using to find better paying work that you're not going to have to work 50 gigs at the same time and literally kill yourself to
Yeah.
even make a living. I always tell composers and stuff like that, if you're starting out, don't take less than 300 a minute.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because like, that's a pretty decent entry wage. And if they don't pay you that much, that's time that you can spend elsewhere in furthering your craft.
If you had an opportunity to get involved with like a short film or some kind of low budget project and doing some scoring, some sound effects, whatever, and that didn't pay, would that be worth it just to get some credits that are out there?
So this is a very hot take. The answer is no.
Hmm.
Credit does not pay you anything. I
Hmm.
did this. My first gig was with an indie film, and and I really enjoyed working that project. I thought it was a really cool thing. I thought it was a really fun project. I really enjoyed the people on it. They were good people. But my whole thought behind it was like, I need that credit. I need that credit. And this was after people already told me you don't need that credit. And I didn't get anything from that credit.
Hmm.
Nothing,
Hmm.
nothing at all. If you decide to work with other people, that are, don't necessarily have the budget or anything like that, the thing that I always like to advocate for is looking to see if there's a potential opportunity for a skill share. So, for instance, in
Mm.
regards for the indie film that I was doing, obviously they're going to have some video production skills. Why not see if they could maybe make some marketing material for me in regards for, or in exchange for, my music services. And then that way, like, I'm receiving something on the back end. It might not be monetary, but I'm still getting a little bit of compensation in the form of work done for me as well. So that's
Bartering.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so that's the thing that I always kind of recommend, is see where there's opportunities for skill share. Like lessons, teaching opportunities, um, marketing materials, graphic design, stuff like that. I think it's a really good thing if companies can offer that instead of money too.
Well, what's a typical day like for you?
That really depends. These last 2 weeks have been like go, 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 go. I've been making sound design like every day. Currently I'm working on subtitles right now. I do a lot of subtitle work and video editing, as the audio lead with Everbloom. Um, 2 days out of the week I'll do lessons, and that's kind of what I do. I typically take one day off a week right now, with my other day off being Sunday, but that's actually my lesson day, and I still kind of consider that my day off in a way, even though I teach for 7.5 hours or so.
Oof.
Um, yeah, it's a ride.
Mhm.
But in general, a typical day will look like I wake up when I want, which is usually around 6 to 6:30, and I start working until 2 to 3 generally. And I kind of work at my own pace. For that. I'll take breaks when I want to. And I'll do anything between sound design, organizing the community that I help run, um, subtitles such as today, voice editing, meetings. I have a lot of meetings that I have to be at currently. Other things that I'm working on, other meetings with other people not associated with the company that I'm with. Um, and then a lot of emails. And a
Mhm.
lot of instant messages. I get a lot of messages, and I spend a lot of time writing things to different people at this point. One of the things that I always try telling people is, what I want to be is, I want to be a composer, um, and everything that I do is so that I can then write music. And like, people will be like, well, you must spend like 7-8 hours a day writing music. It must be great to just write music. And the last time I wrote music was when I submitted music for Disney back in, I think, August of last year.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
almost been a year to this point of the last time that I actually wrote music. And everything else is just the time that I spend to write music. So yeah.
Yeah, supporting like the infrastructure to allow yourself to write music and a lot of the details. Yeah. Hmm. I remembered the question I was thinking about. As a recent college grad, you're probably trying to develop portfolio. Do you try, is that something, is that another myth where you need an extensive portfolio to kind of show off and get work?
Yeah, so you're probably not going to upload the video after this one.
No,
But
it's this
yeah,
is great. This is great.
yeah. So I kind of have some hot takes here, and I think that portfolios are really they're not necessarily overrated, but I think that people do them really badly. And I
Hmm.
think they go with the idea of like, well, I need to be a jack of all trades. And because in the at least in the music composing world, the idea is like, well, you'll get contacted for a gig and they'll be like, well, like you can do it all and I want you to do it all. And in effect, that doesn't really happen. And when people do that, they kind of get into this kind of I don't like saying the jack of all trades, master of none mindset, because I don't necessarily think that's super accurate.
Hmm.
But it does start to show in their work that it might not be the best stuff that they put out. And I think that the way that people should be looking at doing portfolios and stuff like that is picking maybe three different things that they really really excel in, and then putting those inside of their portfolios, and then really limiting it, and then even tailoring their portfolio almost kind of like a cover letter, to where the first thing that you see is like job applicables. Like for instance, if my specialties that I try to market my music on are large orchestral, classical, ambient music, and sound design music. And so, say that my portfolio would normally be organized ambient, orchestral, and then sound design music. Um, and they wanted, and it was an orchestral job that I was applying for. I would then reorganize my whole portfolio then to have the orchestral stuff at first and be like, hey, if you're checking out one track, listen to this one first, listen to this one second, and then down the line. And then if you really focus in on what you're good at, you're going to find that your portfolio is going to be a lot more effective. And if it's smaller, you're going to find that people aren't going to be overwhelmed and just move on. If even if there's only one or two things, because they don't have time either.
Hmm.
They don't have time to sort through all that. They don't want to. You got like maybe like a minute to impress them and to try to get them to listen to more. So people put way too much emphasis and way too much time into their portfolios. Just pare it down to what you're really good at.
Yeah, and what you want to focus on too. You got to be careful on what you want to show in your portfolio.
Yeah. And the cool thing about it too is like once I started doing that, like that's the stuff that I was hired for.
Hmm.
And that's the only thing that I am really hired for now. I don't have to do the rock music. I don't have to do the lo-fi music. I don't have to do the synthwave music because that's not what I market myself on.
Yeah.
I'm contacted more often now because I focus on those three different things and people know that's what I excel in.
What's the most rewarding aspects about your career?
There's a lot of different things that I think I could say. Personally, I really like the flexibility of being able to more or less make my own schedule. In regards for the freelance side of things, I think that's a really good perk. Um, the other thing that I think a lot of people would probably shy away from in saying is that they have the opportunity to say no, or is that I have the opportunity to say no as often as I want. And so if a project comes along that I just don't want to do, like I don't have to do it. And that's really liberating. Being able to take essentially what people are like, hey, can you do this? And just being like, no, I'd rather work on other things. And they're just like, all right.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I really enjoy about this as well, because it really just allows me to tailor exactly what I want at any given time, more or less, at least for the freelance side of things.
Hmm. Hmm. The and it's kind of having all these different roles. Is that kind of help you not get sick of doing one thing too much, and you're doing some lessons, and or are some of these kind of multiple roles just like, well, this helps financially. I need to do this financially.
So this is kind of a multi-layered question, I guess.
Hmm.
The doing a bunch of roles kind of came about partially because of the financial side of things. It definitely really helps out. I'm very stable at this point financially because I can take on so many different things and do them to, a certain standard. Um, the thing that kind of I never really thought that this would happen is I got really almost exhausted of doing music like
Hmm.
constantly.
Yep.
And then I got really exhausted of doing sound design constantly, and I get
Yeah.
really exhausted of doing meetings constantly. And so it's like, it's nice because every day, like it might be similar things, but I'm doing something different every day. And so I really enjoy that. And that's not to knock on people who only want to write music all the time. I've just personally found that, regardless of whether it's music, sound design, voice editing, whatever it be, I'm really tired of sitting in this room 8 hours a day.
Mhm.
I'm getting really tired of it. And it's like, I'm really into playing video games and stuff like that. And my computer is well equipped to play video games and do all that certain type of stuff. And it's like, and I don't find myself doing that inside of the office anymore. And I find ways to put that out in the living room. That way I
Mhm.
don't have to do that in here.
Mhm.
And so part of the reason of why I really enjoy keeping lessons as well is because I don't do those from home. I drive out to Issaquah. I live in Renton, and I drive out to Issaquah to teach lessons from a studio out there. And it's well worth it to just, be in a different location for,
Mhm.
10 hours a week. That's really nice.
Yeah, and it sounds like I'm sure everybody's unique, so that everybody has to find that right balance. But you don't want to overuse a passion to where then it just becomes a grind and it just feels like work all the time, right?
Yeah, one of the talks that I heard at GDC a while back was from a composer by the name of Jason Graves, video game composer. He worked on games like Dead Space, if I remember correctly.
Mm.
And one of the questions that he was asked in that talk was like, do you write music for yourself? And he just goes, I don't have time. And
Mhm.
and it's just, now it's like, I want to write some rock music for myself. I want to try doing some singer songwriter stuff, and I just don't have time.
Mhm.
And that's not me complaining. I'm not complaining about that at all. But one of the questions I am asked frequently is, well, like, what do you write in your spare time? And it's like, well, I don't.
Mhm.
you know I'd rather explore other things other than what might be related-ish to work.
Yeah.
So
And we're kind of getting into some of the challenging aspects. Are there any other challenging aspects?
yeah, all of it. All of it. Every talk that I always give, I always say, and I always open and end every talk by saying, this is hard. I was, if I was living in a perfect world, I would be a lifelong student in academia. I love the academic settings, and I know that I'm very weird in that sense, but I love classroom. I love classrooms. I love studying. I love listening to the lectures and stuff like that. And because of that, like I always got very good grades throughout all of high school, all of college, and everything like that. And transitioning over to this and taking my skills from academia to where nobody cares what happened in academia has literally been probably the second hardest thing I've ever done outside of ear training in music theory.
Wow.
And so it's been very difficult because it goes from not the textbook stuff and not what people tell you to do, but to what works for you. And what do you do so that way you can happen to be lucky at any given chance? Because this isn't a career of where like you go out and you give a resume to people. That's how you don't get hired.
Mhm.
It's how do you go out and meet people and actually establish connections with people so that when people are ready for work, they might think of you. That's kind of what it is. And it's hard because people want money now, but I didn't actually start turning a profit, and I mean a little profit, until like after 3 years of doing this.
Yeah.
And I've been truly, truly blessed in what I've done, because it takes most people like 8 years to get to a point of stability. And I had kind of done it, and I've done it in about 5.
Nice.
And so I've been truly blessed in that regard. And so, I tell people like, this is hard, and, the grind doesn't really quit.
Yeah.
So,
And I know we talked about this in the poster, but for the video sake, what advice would you give to students thinking about this career?
the biggest thing that I can always basically, there's 3 things, and they're all, I guess, kind of different. The first thing is, when someone tells you to go right, especially in the academic world, when someone says, no, this is what you do, go left.
Mhm.
If you go right and you do what everybody what you're hearing is the normal thing to do, like, oh, give out business cards, uh give out business cards, or what are the other, have a website,
Mhm.
stuff like that. That's the stuff that, like, this is what'll find you work. It won't.
Mhm.
Go left. Do what everybody else isn't doing, because if you go along with everybody else, now you're going with the grain, and now you're pitting yourself against all of the other people doing the same thing, and the only people who win that are the ones who are the best. That's
Mhm.
just the fact of the
Mhm.
matter. But if you go left, like, that sets you apart, and then you'll start to find out that people will hire you for you and not necessarily for your skills, which is super important. The second thing to answer this question that's a little bit more immediate is find a community of like-minded individuals in your profession, or what you want your profession to be. If you don't find a community, you are going to struggle so hard.
Mhm.
And part of the reason why I got my start was because of a community that I had joined from a course that I had joined shortly after graduating. And that course really helped me get started on my career. And it was a paid course, so, and you had to pay to be a part of the community. And since then, did I want something like that maybe people who didn't have the resources could join as well and get similar benefits to. And so, there wasn't really a market for that. So, I started my own community. Well, I shouldn't say my own community. I started a community in regards for video game music and sound design specifically, of where people could get ideas
Mhm.
and learn and how to find work. And, and everybody could fail and learn together, myself included.
Mhm.
Um, and so, the big thing that I always say is start finding a community now and get involved, because if you wait till after you're graduated, then you're going to be finding that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 year time gap to be a lot longer than if you had started it when you're in college in particular. And the third thing, and this is a bit more tangible, is social media is really important to a degree for what we do as freelancers today. And a lot of people think, well, I have to wait to get my portfolio ready. I have to wait to get, my thoughts together and everything like that. And the thing is, social media doesn't care if you have your portfolio and everything ready to go. It cares about time and consistency in the algorithm. And so if you start doing that in college, you cut a lot of that time out for when you're actually ready to hit the ground running. So, make your socials, figure out how the algorithms work between all of them, because they're all different. And start posting and getting stuff out there. That way, when you're ready to finally start creating content, you're prepped and ready to go.
Nice, good advice. On the community one, any examples on how to either find a community or start a community?
Yeah. So basically I'm actually going to pull up I have a PowerPoint that I want to pull up here
Oh,
really
great.
quick, just because I have it in my mind, but I'll probably uh, stumble through them. But so I have what I call my let me find it here really quick. Here we are. So I have what I call, man, where is this?
Yeah, take your time.
Yeah. Here we are. Okay, so I have what I call my 5 pillars of community, basically, in figuring out a community that is really solid and really good. And so the first one is, it has to be inclusive. It has to allow everybody a place to be able to exist, and a place for everybody to be able to freely share their thoughts in a safe environment. Because that makes it inviting, and that makes it to where people want to participate, because they feel like it's a safe area to participate in discussion and learn and fail alongside everybody else. The other thing is, it needs to be intentional. It needs to be created with a purpose. So for instance, with the community that I made, the intent behind it was that there, as far as I was aware, there was not a specific game music community focused on the business side of things, specifically on the platform Discord. And that was the intention behind the community that I had made, because at the time, Discord was already very popular. It was on its way up still. And there just was not a community on Discord of like-minded individuals who wanted to learn about game music business specifically. And so that was the intention behind it. If there's no intended purpose, or the intended purpose is really weak, you're going to find yourself just falling into the sea of communities, and then you're going to find that like engagement is going to be spread across all of these different ones, and it's not going to be potentially as strong as it could be. The other one is it needs to be accessible. Like it has to be super easy for people to join. So for instance, ours is beats to play games2.com. It redirects a link to Discord that never expires for that community. And all I have to do is say, go to beats to play games2.com. And then people will go there and they're right in.
Nice.
And so that is another thing. And then within inside of whatever community you're in, especially if it's online, it has to be organized in a really easy way to participate. That way people know exactly what they're getting at all times. Collaborative. It has to be collaborative. That way people can work together and feel safe in working together. That way they can learn from each other, and they need to be excited to work with each other as well in the regards for that. And the other thing, and I actually think this is the most important one, is it has to be autonomous and it has to run itself, because people who are admins or moderators or community leaders or anything like that, they often don't have time to run it. And so if you're spending like constant time like moderating issues or problems or stuff like that, it gets to the point of where like you can't focus on your own work, because oftentimes these aren't paid.
Yeah.
And if it's not, and then if it's autonomous also, that translates directly over to the members. Because then at that point it's member focused rather than admin focused, because you really want almost this inverted structure of where it's like the admins of the community leaders of the server are supporting the moderators, who are supporting the core participators, who are then supporting the new people and the general members of the community. That way everybody feels supported by each other, rather than this top down like, well, can't say anything bad, otherwise admin's going to come in and kick me. So
Sure. Great. Wow,
that's the other thing.
that's very organized. That's very useful for our students thinking about that. I would also assume that the community also helps with commiserating when this is very lonely work at times, and working by yourself in a room for 8 hours day after day can be pretty exhausting, I would
Yeah.
assume.
Yeah, it gets to be pretty rough. And a lot of people, especially in those who might not be in a position to travel to different events within the video
Mhm.
game industry, specifically like GameSoundCon or Game Developers Conference, or I think GamesCon is another one, and travel to these larger events. Oftentimes we'll run events side by side that some of the moderators will lead or myself will lead. That way people who might not be able to go will be able to go to these adjacent, meetups that we might have online, to kind of not, take the place of it, but, kind of take the edge off of not being able to attend.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool. And also, something I always tell people is like, if you're struggling with something like finding a community or just all the above in your career, it's been done before. There's hardly anything that hasn't been done before. And a community like this, that collaboration, that probably shortcuts a lot of people from learning things the hard way or grinding through something when 5-minute conversation could save them an hour or two at a time.
My whole thing now that I like to tell people is the first game soundtrack that I ever did was done in the program Sibelius, which is a music notation software. And that's how I thought it was done.
Mm.
I was so wrong. And having a short communication or having a short conversation with literally anybody outside of the classical music world would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of hassle.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to say that we didn't cover that you think would be important for current students to know?
Mm, Off the top of my head, no. I think I've
Mhm.
generally covered the biggest things that I normally like to hit on.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kyle. I really appreciate your time and sharing your information, your career, and the reflections and advice. And I hope great success in your future.
Yeah, thank you.